Chapter 17 continued. Diversity of fungi. What is a fungus? A heterotrophic eukaryote. Now, fungi are chemoheterotrophs like us. They have to eat, but they're not ingestive heterotrophs. It means they don't take the food internally to digest it. Instead, they are able to secrete enzymes which digest the food outside of their bodies, and then they absorb the digested nutrients. So they're absorptive heterotrophs. Humans are ingestive heterotrophs. There's a distinction here. All right, fungi are not plants. Some people make that mistake. It's understandable, but they're not. They're actually quite different from plants in many regards. All right, first things first. Fungi, with the exception of yeast, which are single-celled, are multicellular. And they consist of a mycelium, which is just a mass of filaments of strands of filaments of cells called hyphae, which are like threads, essentially. There are different groups of fungi. In some fungi, the hyphae are chains of cells separated by cross walls. But the cross walls have openings in them that allow materials to move from cell to cell very easily. So things swim around inside a fungal hyphae. And that's a big difference right there between plants and fungi. And this is a picture here of a fungus that's taken over this mass of conifer needles. All right, when you look at a mushroom, what you're looking at is a reproductive structure. Most of the fungus is underground. You don't see it. The majority of the mycelium, you'd have to dig it up. That's in the soil. So the part that you see here, part that we like to eat on our steaks, is simply a reproductive structure. Fungi have cell walls made of chitin. Remember, in plants, it's cellulose. Chitin. Chitin is also found in the exoskeletons of arthropods, insects. So when you step on that bug, and it goes crunch, what you're crunching is the chitin. Fungi can be free living. Some of them have symbiosis with other things. In some cases, the symbiosis is parasitism. They obtain their nutrients and in the process harm the host, which can be a plant or an animal. But not all fungi are bad. Most of them are good. And plants without certain types of fungi wouldn't do very well. And as a matter of fact, there's an intimate association between most plants and fungi called mycorrhizae, which is a symbiotic relationship between fungi and plant roots. This is a beneficial relationship. It is actually mutualism. Yes, the fungi infect the plant roots, but there is no harm. There is help. Because all the fungi ask of the plants is a little bit of sugar. And what they supply to the plants in return far outweighs what they take. The mycorrhizae extend the surface area in the soil far beyond that of the root, where the roots go, and absorb water and important nutrients and supply that to the plant in return for that little bit of sugar that they ask for. So everybody benefits. And the fungi do pay their part, pay for the relationship, and they're both benefit. Fungi do not produce seeds. They reproduce by multitudes of haploid spores. And these spores are easily transported by wind, water, here is one fungus releasing its spores. Okay, let's look at another video. Ooh, that's shooting them out. Oh, wow, check that out. That's pretty cool, don't you think? Yeah. Ooh, that's getting down. They release lots of spores too. That's why they're so successful. Now, if the spore lands in a suitable place, it will germinate and grow into a whole new fungus. And I want to make a point here. Fungi are haploid organisms. They are haploid with only a diploid part, and the diploid part tends to be a single cell, not multicellular. The multicelled part of the fungal life cycle is haploid, and the diploid part, which is part of the reproductive cycle, is a single cell. So the spores are haploid. They germinate and grow through mitosis into a new mycelium. Now, spores in fungi can be produced asexually or sexually. And we'll talk about both. Okay, this is a diagram of a fungal life cycle involving both the asexual reproduction and the sexual reproduction. This is a generalized life cycle. Sexual reproduction involves two different mycelia, two different fungal organisms. And they have to be, they don't have sexes, male and female. Instead, they have different mating types, which we represent as plus and minus. And they release chemical signals to attract one to the other. Plus and minus get together. Two pluses do not. Two minuses do not. It has to be plus and minus. Male and female. Okay. When they meet their hyphae, they will fuse their cytoplasms. And what happens is they exchange nuclei. They grow together and form a separate structure called a heterokaryotic stage, in which the mycelia here are n plus n, not 2n, n plus n. Each cell contains two distinct haploid nuclei, one from each parent. Now, they remain in this heterokaryotic stage, and it can take, hours, days, even centuries. And then at the right time, the two haploid nuclei fuse, producing the diploid phase. They produce zygotes, but the zygote is as far as it goes. The zygotes undergo meiosis, producing the haploid spores. Now, how we classify the fungi are the specialized structures that they use to reproduce. Now, in asexual reproduction, which is separate from sexual reproduction, they produce spore-producing structures, which develop from haploid mycelia, not heterokaryote mycelium, just haploid. And release their haploid spores that way. And many fungi reproduce sexually and asexually. They do it both. Now, one classification of fungi is imperfect. They have not been observed to complete sexual reproduction in the lab, so they only reproduce asexually. And many molds, bread mold, for example, penicillium, are imperfect fungi. Yeast are imperfect. Now, we define a mold as any rapidly grown fungus that reproduces asexually by producing spores, and they're also multicellular. Yeast are single-celled fungi. All right, let's see here now. All right, 100,000 described species, but there may be more, probably are more, especially in the tropics. And fungi and animals are closely related. Actually, the oldest undisputed fossils of fungi are only about 460 million years. They haven't found any older yet, but all right, the classification of fungi, I'm just going to say this, it's up in the air. And basically, your textbook recognizes 5 main groups. The chytrids, zygomycetes, black bread mold, the mycorrhizal fungi, the ascomycetes, and the basidiomycetes. And it doesn't show the imperfect fungi in here. So they're not even, these are just sexual. They're just recognizing these 5 categories based on, these all will reproduce sexually. The chytrids are an interesting group. They have flagellated spores and believed to be the oldest of the fungi. And they're found in lakes and water, and they're linked, correlated with the decline of amphibian species. Zygomycetes produce zygotes. They house their zygotes in a zygosporangium. The zygotes will undergo meiosis, produce haploid spores. The black bread mold, they also attack peaches, strawberries, sweet potatoes, and cause disease in some animals. Rhizopus stolonifer, black bread mold. The glomerulomycetes. These are a distinct type of mycorrhizae. There's about 80% of all plants have a symbiotic relationship with these, which is mutualism. This is a drawing of the fungus inside a root cell. The ascomycetes, better known as the sac fungi, they produce reproductive structures called asci. Morels, the cup fungi. Yeast are actually classified here. And some of them associate symbiotic relationships with green algae or cyanobacteria and form what is called a lichen. Morels, which are edible, as an ascomycete, the cup fungus. Basidiomycetes, the club fungi, mushrooms, puffball, shelf fungi. They're named for the reproductive structure called a basidiocarp, which houses basidia, which actually form haploid spores, singular basidium. They're decomposers and also parasites. The destructive rusts and smuts belong to this group. So mushrooms, puffballs, shelf fungi. Fungi have more benefits. They do more good than harm, is what I'm saying. They're beneficial. As mycorrhizae, they help the plants out. With bacteria, they're decomposers. They break down organic matter and recycle vital nutrients and may play a part in bioremediation. I don't know how far along they are with that, but apparently they use them in bioremediation. Interesting. This is a fungal mycelium. Humans, we use them for food. They also used in cheese production. Blue cheese, That's a fungus on the cheese, the blue stuff. Yeast produce alcohol, ethanol, bread rising, antibiotics. Produce antibiotics. Why would a fungus produce antibiotics? Well, both fungi and bacteria compete for the same food resources. Antibiotics are used to kill bacteria. By killing off the competition, hey, more for you. But we can harvest these antibiotics for you to help make us well when we come down with a bacterial infection. Molecular biology, for example. We use yeast to study the molecular genetics of eukaryotes. Maybe future production of biofuels. All right, blue cheese. The blue part's the fungus. Penicillin. Mold releases penicillin. And see this area? Where the mold grows, the bacteria have to back off. White rot fungus. All right, lichens. A symbiotic relationship. Most of which is mutualistic. Fungi and algae, or blue-green algae, or cyanobacteria. The fungus receives food from the photosynthetic partner. The fungal mycelium provides a house for the algae, essentially. Lichens are some of the newly formed, let's say after a volcanic eruption, the ground is bare, no plants, nothing's grown, just rock. Lichens are the first to colonize. They'll grow on the rocks, and by digesting and breaking down the rock, form soil. Lichens can dry out. However, air pollution is bad for them. It kills them. So this is an indicator of air pollution. Crust on rocks, lichens. This shows a scan and electron micrograph of algae and fungus in a lichen. Reindeer moss is actually a lichen. Well, there is a hypothesis. Symbiosis with fungi was a key to the colonization of land by plants. And researchers have been studying this by looking at present-day relationships, looking at fossils, and looking at genetics. All right, and what have they come up with? 80% of all plant species form mycorrhizal relationships. And because in almost all major lineages show a mycorrhizae, this may go back, maybe an ancient origin from this. There is fossil evidence in Scotland where the fungus and the plants have been preserved in fossils. And this goes back 400 million years. And they have these little structures that are fungi infecting the root cells. And molecular genetics. There is a gene that encode the plant's part of the relationship. And these genes have been found in all major groups of plants. All right, let's look at the prediction that some genes have changed little over time. Here's a source of the gene, a liverwort, and here's a bacteria with a recombinant plastid. Relative of the alfalfa. It's a mutation. It doesn't have the gene. And the control plant does have the gene. Okay, we introduce the gene into the mutant plant. We infect it with this agrobacterium. We infect this mutant. And then we give them apply the fungal spores. And then we end up with mycorrhizae pleasant. And then we have, into the sim plant, we have the mycorrhizae. And the other plant, The control plant, we did not introduce the gene. It's absent. All right. Of the 100,000 known species of fungi, 30% cause diseases in plants. And about between 10 to 50% of the world's fruit harvest is lost, and a variety of fungi, grain crops, are affected by rusts and smuts. Corn smut. Ergots on rye. 50 species of fungi are parasitic on people, animals. Ringworm disease, it's called because it occurs as a circle, athlete's foot, vaginal yeast infections, and valley fever, and other diseases caused by fungi.